Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 61 of the Watch Rolling Podcast. The Watch Rolling Podcast is a veteran-owned podcast that focuses on watch collecting and horology from a veteran background and tries to share valuable veteran resources with the watch enthusiast community. My name is Jason. I'm your host. If you're new to the pod, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. The Watch Rolling Podcast is sponsored by the Anti-Watch Watch Club. Anti-Watch Watch Club is a 501c3 charity, nonprofit. They support veteran and Leo first responder-centric services through an organization that provides monetary, social, humanitarian, and emotional support to those in need. And the AWWC utilizes a drop-style culture to do that. They do it with cool stuff like the flag behind me. They have T-shirts. They have Nalgene bottles, shorts. And then they, take no salary and put 100% of the proceeds to these charities that they help. Episode 61 is a pretty special episode. We're going to have an interview with Eric from Rico's Watches podcast. Eric is a longtime supporter of the watchrolling.com, everything. Eric had me back on episode 54, and I'll be more than happy to have Eric come on and talk to you guys. It's going to be pretty awesome. Eric does a lot for the law enforcement community. He's involved in the law enforcement community and does a bunch of veteran-based stuff too as well. But, first and foremost, we got together over watch enthusiasm, but also for our shared love and respect for first responder community. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on board Eric. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Good. How's it going, Jason?
Oh man, it's going. It's going. I gave everybody your intro, but how's everything been?
Good, man. Yeah, things have been going well. The people that are familiar with my show that have come over to watch and listen, I mean, they already know what there is to know about me and kind of how I operate and do things. But for you pretty much hit everything already, kind of on your intro of me. But yeah, I'm Eric. I'm the owner and host of Rico's Watches podcast. I've been at this now for coming up pretty close in about 3 years. So yeah, it's been going really great. I kind of focus on our diverse amount of content on my podcast. So I cover a lot of things from interviewing collectors, CEOs, industry reps, brand representatives, people like that on my podcast as well too. But then in the last probably year or so, I've branched into discussing just kind of talking to veterans, veteran stories, first responders, people like that, giving them an opportunity to come on the show. Talk about watches, of course. Most of the people that come on the show are also watch enthusiasts, but sometimes we just do episodes that focus strictly on just kind of telling their stories and giving them a platform to share some of the really interesting and heroic things that they did during their times when they're in service or if they're still in service. So that's kind of what I do with Rico's Watches podcast. Obviously, yeah, you and I have known each other now for probably about as long as the show's been around, so about 3 years or so. Finally going to get to meet you hopefully next month in Virginia. Yeah. I'll be in your neck of the woods, so that'll be pretty cool. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. And I was really happy when you decided to start your own show. And I'm here to finally be a part of that. And I'm really excited for that, man.
You're one of the first people that kind of like theoretically punched me in the face and said, you should probably, get off your butt and do some recording yourself. And I really appreciate it because it was instrumental in me just kind of finding what I wanted to do. And, you know how it is when you start, you have an idea, but then stuff kind of morphs and changes and you just kind of go along with the flow. But it's the most important thing is just to get them done and get them knocked out and adapt as you need to based on whatever comes around the corner.
I think that's one of the most important things that you just said too, is like, honestly, like just start, right? So many people are, will already defeat themselves before they've even tried, just because they'll tell themselves, no one wants to hear what I have to say. Nobody wants to watch my show. I'm not good enough. And it's not true, man. Like, honestly, like, especially you coming from, a background in the military and things like that as well too. Like, how to talk to people, the lingo, how to be charismatic and to talk and engage in conversation. And that it's really not that hard to just have people come on a show and let them tell their story and just ask thoughtful questions, and I think that that's a really important thing. And the other thing you brought up that's really interesting too is you never really know where something like this is going to end up. And which I think is, tremendous. Like when I started my show a couple of years or 3 years ago, like first of all, I would have never believed that I would ever have a show one day, let alone that people would watch it. And then let alone that I would talk to some of the people that I've had the opportunity to chat with on the show and kind of see how it's developed over the last few years. It's been an absolute privilege, and extremely humbled by the success of the show and the support of the community behind it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing that I think is important, especially for a show like yours, because we talk about it all the time on Government Cheese Time, me and Alex, about how brands need to do a better job of getting out and telling their story or letting people see a little bit of personality. And your show does that. And it's a wide array of people you interview, but specifically like the watch people, the people in the industry.
Mm.
A lot of them, you'll hear them. They'll come across as watch enthusiasts first, or they won't. And I think for a lot of people that are, newer watch enthusiasts or just kind of, getting started, when you hear someone kind of talk about it robotically, and you can tell it's business, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, everyone's trying to make a buck, but when you hear someone like, say, Mike Pearson from Zodiac, and he's just waxing poetic, for hours at a time.
Yeah.
You're like, oh man, like that. I'm kind of interested in Zodiac now because I kind of like hearing what they're coming from. I think that's what's great about your show. I mean, whether it's that or it's someone who's just interested in watches that also has a cool job, you can hear that passion for their job and then how watches play into that passion for their job.
100%.
I think that's a good thing. But before we get carried away, let's get a wrist check. What do you got on the wrist today, Eric?
Well, I tried to figure out what I was going to wear, and I figured I'd just go with Old Faithful. It's sort of the watch that I think I'm the most associated with, I suppose, as it were, for anyone who knows me or knows the show. So I threw on my old Tudor Pelagos.
Oh, yeah, man. That thing's so good.
Yeah, I love this.
It's so good.
It's getting pretty beat up. I mean, I've been wearing it now for probably about 5 years or so. But I like it as it gets beat up and scratched up and the titanium gets kind of marred up. I think it kind of just gives it all that character and kind of reminds me a little bit of like the when you see photos of like the old unpolished like 5513 subs and things like that, where they're have had 60 years of scratches on them, but these are made of titanium, so they scratch a little faster and age a little faster, I think, which I think is really cool.
They're wonderful pieces, man. It's OG black one, right?
Yeah, this is the OG black one in 42 millimeter, but it has the in-house movement, so it's like the second generation.
Okay.
But nothing fancy or superfluous about it. It's just the good old plain Jane Tudor Pelagos.
It's still on the list, but I'm waiting for a non-French Navy, non-energy drink racing version of the FXD. That's what I want. Mm-hmm. If they had a black version of FXD like yours, I'd be all over it like a hobo on a ham sandwich.
Well, I mean, I won't say anything, but I mean, you might be happy with what comes out in the next 6 to 12 months then. So.
Oh man, okay. Well, I'm starting up a new certificate of deposit with a high interest rate return.
There you go.
But on my wrist today, I got my Grand Seiko SBGX 335.
That's a killer piece, man. That's a really cool piece. Wow.
Oh,
I haven't seen one of those yet. They're really, really nice.
Well, I'll make sure that I wear it when I come to see you.
What
I'll
size?
bring some other stuff too.
What size?
It's 43 millimeter.
Okay, nice. But it wears small, like it wears like smaller, like most Seikos do.
Yeah, the lug, if I remember correctly, is 49, but I have a 7.5 inch wrist, so
not bad.
You know what I mean? It sits perfect. It's well balanced. I mean, the Zaratsu polishing. I mean, I got it from Crown and Caliber for a really good price. The bracelet's comfortable. The bracelet tapers. It's got that 9F6 quartz movement, thermal compensated. It's got the dual pulse motor, so every second it goes, and that's why it can have a metal second hand. Most quartz ones can't, and it also has the whole gear train's encompassed. So when I open it up to change a battery, if I ever have to, I don't expose any of the gear train to any dust or anything.
Nice.
And it has this anti-backlash motor or gear. So it doesn't do the boing thing that most quartz clocks do. It just stops, man, on a second. But it's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts.
Wild.
But no one's here to hear about my watch collection.
Hey, I'm here to hear. It's a pretty high speed piece, man. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I try to it was you and I have talked, man. When I came on your show back in episode 54, go check it out on Rico's Watches podcast if you haven't. I was so proud that day to wear my marathon TSAR, and I've since moved that piece on. In the pursuit of another marathon, which I'll share with you after we get done recording, which I think will blow your mind. Okay. But this was just a culmination of everything I've learned over the last 3.5 years. I wanted a dive piece that I could wear like anywhere, and I could wear this thing anywhere, and I could wear it to work, and I can wear it to meetings, and then when I get around I just like Seiko because they've afforded me so much experience across a wide variety of price ranges. But I digress. We're here to talk about other stuff. But anyways. So let's get started with the chat, Eric. Let everybody know a little bit about you for my audience that may not know you, just like your professional experience. And you can only, tell as much as you want. You don't have to go to super in depth, but and how it kind of relates to your whole watch enthusiast thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a police officer for 9 years up in Canada, Western Canada. It's not that hard to figure out where. You can just type my name into Google and you'll see pictures of me talking to classrooms, kids, and things like that. But
Nice.
I have been doing that for a long time. I started policing when I was 21 years old, so started kind of young. It definitely was an eye opener and definitely a life changing experience, as it were. You grow up quickly on the job. You know, at 21, your buddies are taking a year off of university or traveling to Europe or partying and doing stuff like that. And, you know, I'm doing all the things that, you know, police do in a day, which we don't need to get into a lot of the grotesque details of that. But I mean, it can be a very interesting gig. I did that I've been doing that for the last 9 years. And, but just before the pandemic started, I kind of thought, you know, I never really had social media. So I figured I'll do the whole social media thing, just because, you know, I never was a super social person who liked to go out and do a lot of stuff on days off anyways, but I was like, okay, well, now I can't do anything. So I was like, might as well start up a little bit of social media. So I got onto Instagram, started doing some watch posting, just kind of made my own little collection. I think it was initially just called Rico's Watches. And I remember like my old photo was like a picture of like my wrist with my Pelagos on, holding like my blue Yeti mug, and that was kind of my go-to for a long time. And you know, I had an opportunity to chat with some other folks and things like that. I chatted with a couple people who had not podcasts but like internet type shows. And I kind of had this idea for what I would like to see from like a watch podcast. Floated it to a few people. No one really seemed super interested in doing it. So I was like, okay, well, just do it myself. So set it up. Like I said, and then the rest is really kind of just history from there. It kind of took off. I mean, my interview style on my show, really, like, especially in the beginning, for the first probably like 50 to 100 episodes, really was just based on training I got in policing and experience I got in policing on how to interview people, which was essentially just like ask open-ended questions and then shut up while people answer and don't cut them off, which for a lot of people surprisingly difficult. It sounds simple, but it's definitely interviewing becomes a bit of a skill set. And then over the last 134 or 140 episodes or whatever I'm at nowadays, you know, it's really just developed kind of into its own thing. You know, through my connections, just through policing and watches in general, and kind of being in that community, I've been able to kind of expand into chatting with some of these first responders and military personnel types as well too, which has really just changed the way the show works as a whole. But it's been great. It's really fun for me as well too. I find like the interviews where I'm able to talk to these people and hear their stories, and kind of some stuff I can relate to. Some stuff is so just like mind-blowingly nuts. I can't relate to, but it certainly makes it very engaging and interesting for me as a host to be able to talk to people and be able to kind of share their story and be a part of that. So yeah,
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's awesome, because that's one of the things, you know, my podcast, we try to share valuable veterans resources with the watch enthusiast community, because you never know. But the whole idea behind these interviews, you know, as I get more people on, I want to bring people on that maybe aren't necessarily veterans, but you know, their careers kind of line up with veterans, but they're doing something special, like your podcast and your interview and the other stuff you're doing. Because I feel it's important for veterans, or maybe first responders, like, you know, like yourself, or law enforcement, et cetera, to see that, you know, there's more you can do if you want to do it, and to be able to put examples of people doing that like yourself. Because I feel like, like you said before, like people will talk themselves out of things. But if you see someone that's like similar, like, oh, well, this guy works a similar schedule to me, you know, he deals with the same stuff, but you know, he's been able to set up his podcast and get people on and do cool stuff. I think it's just important to see, because sometimes you kind of it's easy, I think, to get wrapped up in your career or whatever it is that you do, and not see yourself as doing something else until you maybe see someone else doing it, you know?
Well, I think it's important too, just because, like, you know, not everyone was on SEAL Team 6, right? Not everyone, you know, was a Green Beret, right? It's cool to chat with those guys, but also not every podcast is Joe Rogan or, Sean Ryan or Jack Carr or something like that either,
Yeah.
right? So it's really cool to kind of create a space where like guys who maybe had a little bit more of just like a normal military experience, maybe they saw some action, maybe they got to do some cool stuff, but they're not the guys writing a book, or they're not the guys that have their names in the headlines or they're making movies about. I think it's really cool to be able to have a place where guys can come and talk and kind of share their stories, and it still is relevant and interesting and something that people want to hear about. And for the people who did all those amazing things, I'd love chatting with them as well too, right? It's tremendous, but it's just, I try to make a space where my show's open to anybody who really wants to sit down to talk and can talk and tell a good story. And I'm happy to hear that and share that. And I think it's an important thing, kind of like you said, for other veterans or people that are on the fence about it. You're just doing the community a service if you go out there and you create a space where guys can get together and talk. Right.
Oh, yeah. Totally agree.
It doesn't matter if anyone watches it. It should be about, you and this person connecting and talking and sharing a story together for a couple hours and bonding over that. And, they become friends for life. Right. And they have this shared experience. Right. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and it's great. That's exactly what your podcast does, I feel. And congratulations on over 140 episodes. But during those 140 episodes, was there any one specific thing that being a podcast host taught you that you didn't expect?
That's a good question. I mean, there's been a few things that it's taught me. I think that accessibility is something that's really I learned really early on, and is still sort of blowing my mind. And it kind of goes back to like the whole thing of just put yourself out there. But it was like, you growing up, whether it was consuming watch content from places like Warner Wound, Hodinkee, A Blog to Watch, Fratello Watches, whatever, right? Consuming watch content, you always think like it's sort of like these people are so busy and they're doing so much, and like there's no way they would ever even answer an email from you if you sent one in or something like that, right? Or contacting someone at a major company like Omega or Tudor or Rolex, or I mean Rolex doesn't return anybody, so don't worry about them. But I mean, but companies like Oris, things like that, right? You would think that there's no way I'd ever be able to connect with anybody there and talk to them. And that was the one thing that really surprised me the most. And I learned was like the accessibility in the watch space in particular is quite shocking. Like all these companies that are generating content or generating products are very connected to the community. They care a lot about the community. And they're very willing to chat. And if you have a platform and it's a decent platform, they're more than willing to hop on and have a conversation with you and get somebody to come and talk to you. And I think that that's one of the things that I've really, it still surprises me today, now that I've been around for a bit and maybe I'm considered established as part of the watch media, I don't know. I'm able to just DM companies on Instagram or send them an email and get a reply back. And, not every reply is a yes, but I get a reply. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that is pretty cool. Because I think that's one thing that a lot of people, like we've talked about earlier, is that they just get kind of hung up on thinking that maybe no one's gonna reply to me, but it's that all you need is that one person in the right place to do it, and then you could be off and running. It could spread like wildfire.
Well, and everyone knows somebody, right? Like one of the things that's also really, and one thing that I try to ask almost all my guests after I finish an interview, I usually do a quick post debrief after I finish recording. And it's like, hey, do you know somebody who would be interesting to talk to, or someone that you would recommend to be on my show, or that you think would be a good fit? And some of the people that get recommended to me, it's nuts, right? Yeah. Absolutely nuts. And it's amazing to see, but like, it's fantastic. It's crazy how closely associated people are, whether it's in the military space, the watch space, or first responder space, and how you're usually not more than like 1 or 2 degrees separated from like some pretty prolific people and companies if you want to chat with them and you know how to ask the right questions.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, sometimes you meet someone, like when I went to Wind Up, I met someone who knew someone. And I was like, man, I was like blown away by who they knew. And it was a Kevin Bacon thing, but like 1 degree. Yeah. That's awesome. So are there any like common myths about podcasting or content creation that you'd like to share that you heard that you might have initially believed that have kind of turned out to not be so true? Or Or did you not hear any? You might not have heard any.
Well, I mean, I didn't really like, and this is probably something that kind of worked in my favor, was like, I really didn't know anything about it. I wasn't a big consumer of podcasts before I started podcasting. I didn't really do all that much research into it. I did research into like, hey, how do I record conversations? What's a decent webcam? What's a decent microphone? Things like that, right? But I mean, like, I started out with like $100 streaming set from Amazon. So it was like a big like boom mic with an arm on it and like a webcam. I had a buddy of mine. I was using my laptop, which had almost cooked my laptop when it came time to render some of these things. But I ended up having my buddy build me a computer that works really well for what I needed to do and everything. And I mean, the rest was just like structuring interviews, which I'd used from work. So I mean, I didn't really have a lot of like conceptions one way or the other about what podcasting was. I mean, one of the things that I think maybe other people have a lot of misconceptions from, and maybe even from the earlier part of our conversation, they have a bit of a misconception from, is that it's easy. It's not. I'll put you like this. If you have a certain personality type, it's not super hard. If you're able to have a conversation with someone and you're comfortable, like conversationalist, if you are good at interviewing people and things like that, or you come from a background where you talk to a lot of people, that element of it isn't very hard. What is hard is learning all the back end stuff, right? So how to edit videos, upload videos, formatting, compressing your files. So like a 2.5 hour conversation recorded on Zoom or something like that, that can be like a 12, 15 gigabyte file, right? Well, that takes forever to upload onto YouTube or something like that, if that's what you're going to do. Learning how YouTube works, learning how all the podcast platforms work, which platform do you want to go on? And then that, once you even have all your infrastructure in place to actually run your podcast, then you have to figure out things like how are you going to do your write-ups? How are you going to do your episodes, thumbnails, all that type of stuff as well too. And then all the editing, right? I mean, generally speaking, I'm lucky that most of my episodes I can pretty much just upload raw. Like I'll slap an intro on, an outro, clean up a couple things here and there, and it's not too bad. But you learn along the way, right? I mean, if you compare my later episodes, from the last year to my episodes in the first year, or my first 10 episodes, I mean, it's night and day, right? I mean, the equipment got better, my questions got better, you get less nervous, you just start to kind of figure things out a little bit. So I mean, those are some of the misconceptions, I guess the misconception that I'm kind of alluding to is essentially just how much work it is, where it comes to actually like creating content, and then consistently creating content. I mean, it's a job. This is a job, right? I mean, and I don't get paid, right? I mean, I get, I'm lucky enough that I get to work with some cool brands that sometimes want to provide me with timepieces, or they want to support the show through sponsorship or something like that for a month or two or whatever. I mean, that's awesome, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But I mean, I'm not pulling a salary from this. I'm not quitting my day job anytime soon, right? But it's also like you have to be willing to be consistent, right? I mean, I upload weekly, right? For the first probably 3 months of the podcast, I uploaded, I think it was like 3 episodes a week, because I was trying to build a library, and that was nuts, right? I mean, and that was just because I was trying to build a backlog of episodes, so that when people came and discovered the podcast while I was simultaneously pushing it out, that there's more than just like one episode for someone to watch, and then it's like, okay, well, I don't care, I'm going to forget about this guy's one episode on his podcast, right? So that was part of it as well too, is creating all this content. But you have to be willing to, like, once a month I got to sit down and be like, these are the days I can record, these are the people I want to record with, these are the people who've wanted to record with me for like 3 months, but I've had other stuff come up and I haven't been able to do an episode with them, and I got to stay on top of that. Like it's a lot of stuff like that it's a lot of managing, and then you have to treat it like a job if you want it to be good. And then the other thing too, and maybe one of the other misconceptions or things that surprised me about it, was as you build a community around a show or a podcast, is how generous people can be, and how people are so willing to just be involved, right? And one of the things that, like, it blows my mind still is, like, being in the watch space, generally most people that are in the watch space, generally speaking, they have some degree of success in their life, right? I mean, to be able to have a hobby at all, you need to have discretionary income typically. And, watches, even if it's like a $300 Seiko, a $300 watch is a lot of money to most people.
Yeah.
Most people think a $300 watch is crazy, let alone a $3,000 or a $10,000 or $15,000 watch, right? So generally speaking, there's just people that are in the space and are consuming watch content have experienced a certain degree of success in their life, which means generally they have useful skill sets that have been rewarded financially for that. So whether it was something like having someone that was just willing to be like, hey, I like your show, I'd like to create your outro music. And someone just creates me music and is like, here, enjoy, use this music, right? Or I went through a rebrand at the end of season 2, I believe, or as mid-season 2. I kind of went from my old, more like rustic-looking logo to a more like clean, kind of like futuristic sci-fi sort of, I don't even really know what to describe it as, but it looks cool as hell, and I love it. And so that was kind of the direction that it went. And but someone just volunteered their time to do that and was just willing to just do that. And it was like, I want like it's just things like that. So the generosity of the community that you build around it. And I think that hopefully has to do with myself as a host and the way I conduct myself in the watch space and the people that, I interact with and the way I interact with them. I like to think that, some of that's just kind of coming back to me as like karma, as it were. But I mean, I certainly don't expect it. And I don't expect, really, I don't expect anything from the show. I just put out my episodes and see where it takes me. And I've always said that if I start to dislike doing this or starts to become a burden in my life that I don't want to participate in, or I kind of get that like, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore, I'll just stop. Like I don't need to do this. I enjoy doing it. It's my hobby. It's my passion. It's great to see it be successful. But I could just as well make all my accounts private and just buy watches when I want to buy watches and just go back to being a consumer that kind of lives in the dark and does his own thing. Right. So, that's kind of the big thing for me. So those are some of the misconceptions, I think, or things that surprised me on my end. And then also I think are some of the bigger misconceptions that I've noticed from just people in the audience. It's just like, they don't really get how much work it is to do something like this consistently and well, I think.
Yeah, it's a challenge. And especially like if you're kind of a perfectionist or you've been trained to kind of do stuff the right way the first time, and that what you're doing isn't to the level you'd like it to be, but you're not either in the position to do it to that level yet, or, you just got to work through the learning curve, so to say, for it.
Takes time, right? I mean, that's the thing too, is like you're learning, and if you're doing something and you're self-taught, you're going to make mistakes, or you're going to find a way to make stuff work. But as time progresses, you'll find efficiencies and ways that you can do stuff better. And you'll be like, oh man, why didn't I think of that, 6 months ago, right? But I mean, if you're coming at it from a place of like, I just want to have fun and talk to cool people, really it shouldn't feel like that much of a big deal or a burden for you. And then you can kind of just enjoy the process as things naturally progress.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So, speaking of enjoying the process and all that stuff, so what do you think was the biggest challenge you had in producing your podcast? And did you use anything from your professional background to tackle it to achieve a better outcome?
Well, I mean, really at the beginning, if I were like, there's been moments kind of along the way that have presented challenges to the podcast and challenges to me while I've been trying to make the show. Obviously just like the whole self-taught element of it at the beginning and kind of learning everything. I mean, really just like when it came to learning the show, I mean, one of the nice things about how to learn how to do the show and kind of going back to whether you're in the military, law enforcement, any kind of job like that, is generally you've already established that you're trainable, you're teachable, right? Like that was established by, the entry test that you took, whether you joined the military or the police, the however long boot camp was or your training was, and getting screamed at and taught to do all kinds of things. Like essentially, if you're in a position like that, you're trainable and you're a teachable individual, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, it's like, I know I can do this. I know I can learn how to do this. I just have to apply myself and basically tell myself like, hey, this is important. Pay attention and figure it out. So that element of it, I mean, it's just the late nights, being willing to stay up and just put in the work, I think was kind of something where it's like embrace the suck for a bit, as it were,
Yeah.
was kind of the element of it when it came to that. That came from, I think, my training and maybe just my background and kind of who I am as a person. It's just that willingness to just, I get that it sucks now, but it will get easier over time. And this is a new skill that is something that, can be really beneficial in the future. Right. So I definitely, that was something near the beginning that I kind of had to figure out. Obviously interviewing, again, I've kind of alluded to that already a couple times, like structuring my interviews, how I interview people, the sort of rules and mental things that I keep in my own mind when it comes to interviewing people. That is something that I had to sort of get my head around and sort of figure out what I was going to do. But also I was able to lean on a lot of my previous experience. I mean, at the point that I started that, I probably already had about 6 years or so on the job. So, I mean, I knew how to talk to people. I'd done some big interviews and things like that. So I was able to draw from that a lot too. Right.
Yeah.
I still have never really gotten used, 'cause I've had the opportunity to do it a couple times. I've never really gotten used to being on the other side of it, being interviewed. So
Yeah.
people who have maybe heard me on my own show and have come over to watch this, maybe they'll notice I'm a little bit more nervous than usual. Yeah. It's just I'm not used to being interviewed, but interviewing people has gotten even easier over time. And I feel like it's also just kind of helped me a lot with anxiety about public speaking or speaking to strangers and things like that. I mean, to a degree, you sort of have to get over that at work anyways, but that's just in a professional capacity. It's it's my job. I have to talk to people and they know I'm there. So they're going to talk to me because chances are they called me or they're involved in what I'm there dealing with at that time. But just being more open and ambitious and outgoing and talking to people, I think, is something that's kind of come from the show, which is pretty cool. One point during the show, so it would have been just near the end of season 2, between season 2 and the beginning of season 3 of the show, I went from being on a daytime position that I'd been at for a couple of years, so pretty much since right around the beginning of the show, to going back to patrol. So I did 6 years of patrol, and then I had about 2.5 year break. Went to a desk position for a bit just to kind of something different for a little bit. And then now I'm back in patrol. So sort of that totally blew up all of my scheduling and the way I schedule things. In some ways it was a bit of a blessing because obviously having a rotating schedule that is a 24-hour schedule, that makes it really easy when it comes to recording with people in Europe and Asia and things like that, and being more available for interviews and things like that. But on the flip side, it was okay, well, this is happening. I have to be able to create content, generate content consistently, and maintain my schedule with minimal interruption while this is happening and completely blowing up my whole life, let alone just the podcast, right? So, I mean, just because leaning sort of on, again, just there's going to be days where you're sleep deprived. There's going to be days where you are tired or stressed out or whatever. And it's you just got to, be organized, which is a big thing. Organization, discipline, and just being hey, don't be lazy. Just go do this thing. I know you don't want to do this thing or you're tired, but if you just do it, it's done. You don't have to think about it anymore. That is one of the things that's one of the hurdles I had to overcome. And that sort of, that took some time, but you figure it out. And I think it worked out reasonably well. I mean, those are some of the big ones that come to mind. I mean, I'm sure if I sat here long enough, I'd come up with a few more, but I mean, realistically, I try to make this as fun and stress-free as possible because this is my way of kind of escaping work and not being too involved in all the stuff surrounding work. It's sort of going into another world, right? Is talking about watches and getting into this space, right? So that's probably a couple examples. It may not be awesome examples, but
no, I think they're great. And I think it's an important thing to say because I think that you touched on some key terms, right? Organization and discipline. It's stuff that, especially if the audience is, military or law enforcement or first responder, right? You go through some kind of indoctrination period. All of us do, right? To do certain things a certain way, to do them that way every single time. So when you know what's hitting the fan, you're going to perform those actions the same way, right? So no matter how bad the situation is, whether it's a fire, whether it's, some kind of domestic issue or something like that, you're going to perform the same way every single time to help yourself perform the safest way you can for yourself and for those people around you and the people you're helping. And I try to get that across to a lot of veterans as well. It's like, look, you've already had a baseline established for you. If you attack this thing using what you've been taught, it's no different than the challenges you faced before. And probably there's not life risking consequences if you mess up a podcast episode, right? Like your house isn't going to explode if you have to re-record episode 3, or if your audio sounds like crud or whatever, you know what I mean? So I just think I appreciate that because it's good to hear that coming from people from other walks of life that do slightly different jobs, but discipline, organization, that stuff can carry the day for you until you feel comfortable. Because it's funny how you brought up the public speaking thing and how you don't really jive with being interviewed. Dude, for me, it's the intro. I don't want to sound like a robot. And I know I'm good at it, but sometimes I start thinking, man, I sound too robotic. And then I'll have like a weird pause or something like that. But I was an instructor for a long time. So a room of people is a lot less challenging than just a microphone and a camera.
Well, one of the things that surprised me as well, too, kind of leading to your introduction thing, and maybe something that surprised me a bit, was like nothing actually sounds as bad, generally speaking, when it's recorded or in person, as it does in your own head, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I'll say something in like an intro, or I'll ask a question or something like that, and I'll be like in my head, like, can I swear? I don't know. I don't usually swear.
Do whatever you gotta do. I don't care.
I'll be like, man, that sounds fucking stupid in my head. Like I'm talking to this guy who's given up his own time to come and talk to me. And I sound like an absolute moron right now. But then I'll go and listen to that part of the interview when I'm editing, like, 2 or 3 days later or whatever. And I'm like, oh, it sounds totally normal. It flows with the conversation. It doesn't sound bad at all. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's like, not being so hard on yourself all the time, and not just being like such a brutal critic to yourself. And, I think that's sort of that's helped me a lot, a little bit too, maybe in my personal life, is just, hey, maybe that didn't go the way I would have wanted it to go based on my own expectations that I carry in my own mind. But in reality, it turned out fine. It doesn't mean settle for like substandard quality. It just means that like, maybe like we're usually our own worst critic. So, don't beat yourself up over the small details and things like that. Especially again, for me, like, this is a hobby. It's something fun. Like, I get people that, sometimes people say some pretty mean shit, to be honest. But I mean, even if they don't say something mean, but someone DMs you and like, I don't like this about your show. And I'm like, sweet man, I don't care. I do this for free. Like, I'll change it if I want to, or if it's a reasonable request and something I can address that makes sense and is easy. But it's like, I'm not going to spend an extra hour editing my show to change one tiny little thing that some guy on the internet doesn't like. It's like, dude, I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not Sean Ryan. I don't have a production company. I don't have editors. I'm not making $1 million an episode. I'm lucky if I make $10 a month. Yeah. Right.
You're a one person show.
Exactly. And that's one of the things people maybe don't know about my show is I've had people reach out and say, oh, you and your team. I got no team. Yeah. It's me. It's me.
Myself, and I.
I do everything from A to Z. Right. I mean, that's really it. So, I mean, I work full time. I have other jobs as well too, that I do, and businesses that I try and run and things like that. And like, this is just something I do for fun. So
you got it. My wife always says that you got to speak kindly to yourself. You know what I mean? You can be critical of yourself, but you can't tell yourself you're a dummy. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be like
positive self-talk.
Learn from it, move on. Don't repeat the same mistake twice again. And I think it's important. Speaking of teams, did you have a mentor or someone that you could talk to when you were starting your content creation journey? I mean, if you didn't, you didn't, but if you did, is there anything like super valuable you learned from them, or anything you'd like to say or thank them for if you did?
I mean, at the very, very, very beginning, there's a guy named Alex. He's still around. I mean, he's DC Watch Guy was his what's his Instagram handle? I haven't seen him post in a while though. He had some pretty funny memes and stuff he would do for a while, but he really helped me. I think I did episode 1 with him. He really helped me with a lot of the early infrastructure stuff. So like learning how to use Adobe Premiere Pro, how to set up Zoom, some suggestions on stuff for like microphones and cameras, and sort of helped me sort of hone in and refine my interview style. He helped me with some early introductions for guests as well too.
Nice.
And he wasn't he wasn't a podcaster. He didn't have his own show or anything. He just knew a lot of stuff about this type of stuff, and he was just really willing to give his time and be really generous with his time. And like he was a really good dude. I say he still is a really good dude. He's not gone. I just as I look back at that time and everything was going on, like he just gave up a lot of his time to try and help me out. And that's something I've tried to do for a couple other people as well too in the space, whether it's encouraging someone to do it or it's helping people who are setting themselves up, whether it's on Instagram or it's their own show or whatever they want, and trying to give whatever useful tidbits of knowledge I can. And that's what I try and do. So, I mean, that would be someone. And then honestly, along the way, it's just been like, I mean, in the early parts of the podcast as well too, and sort of helping to establish the show, James Lambden over at Analog Shift was a big help. He connected me with a lot of big guests. He connected me with a lot of really cool people for early on in the show. He is very supportive of the show.
Yeah.
He's a great dude. I think he's been kind of like off social media for a bit, taking a bit of a social media break.
Yeah.
But he's always been a big fan of the show. I feel like I can call him a friend, and if I knew that there was someone in the space that I really wanted on the show, he's no more than one phone call away from someone like that, right? So he was a really big influence, and I will always be grateful to him for his help early on in the show.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and then really along the way, I think every guest sort of leaves their impression on me as a host after talking to them, just helping me learn along the way and helping me develop and mature as an interviewer, and honestly, just like, mature as a person. I mean, it's kind of like when it's, how like to talk about how like the culmination, you're like the culmination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Right. Well, I spend a lot of time with guys who all sort of have very similar backgrounds or personalities. So even though I don't necessarily, obviously each one's an individual person, there are certain universal traits that all these people tend to have. And sort of those traits, as I've started to notice them consistently between my guests, I feel like those traits have started to kind of like impact me as well too as a host. So I think that's something that's been really, really cool along the way too.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always cool. Like, I mean, because you did that for me. You got me and interviewed me. And at first I was like, I can't believe this guy's interviewing me. Like when I looked back at some of the guests, right? I was like, I got like a citizen flight master and a Seiko flight master and all this stuff. And it was just cool. But it gives you confidence that people actually want to hear what you got to say, that you can have a voice out there and you can be part of this whole, zeitgeist of watch enthusiasm. I think that's pretty cool. So I got a couple of pretty, like, are there any indispensable or underrated tools, or if you had like a little EDC, like say a 3 or 4 piece EDC kit for anyone that wants to be a content creator, either or, like one tool that when you got it, you were like, oh man, I wish I had this the whole time, or like a little kit, like starter kit that you would recommend. It doesn't have to be like super specific if it doesn't want to be, but just something that someone may not think about.
Well, I mean, when you're really starting out, it's really easy to get kind of caught up in the whole, like gear thing and the equipment thing and stuff like that. And I've really just had to try and figure out over time, like what works and what works at a reasonable price, right? Like it's really easy if you want to, like you can buy like a $2,000 mic and camera set and backlights and all this goofy stuff. And I mean, as anyone knows, listen to my show, I shoot my show in the basement. I have a couple little spotlights and a couple ring lights and stuff that I can use if I need them. But like The lighting in here half the time is dog shit. Like the way my desk is kind of set up in my basement or the studio, as I call it, to make it sound cooler. There's like a window right in front of me, so I'll get like light shining on my face, and sometimes I'll be washed out, and it's like, so I don't get bent out of shape about stuff like that. I know there's people who do, and it's easy enough to remedy. I suppose I could hang a sheet or something like that or whatever, but I don't worry about that. But I bought a decent, maybe like $50 webcam off of Amazon that I think is reasonable at 1080p quality. And then one of the things that I changed, not too early on, but I'd say probably like near the end of season 1, I got a better mic. And I didn't want to spend a crazy amount of money. I used to have this whole like boom mic thing with like a crane arm that came over, and then it would kind of sit here in my face. It looked kind of cool or whatever. But like, I ended up getting one of these like blue snowball type deals, a little USB plug-in thing. And honestly, for like the like $75 or whatever it was I paid for it on like Amazon Prime Day, it has given me, it creates great sound quality. It works super well. It's plug and play. You don't have to worry about it. So, I mean, you don't have to spend a lot to create something decent and something that people can listen to. A decent computer. I mean, a lot of people, if you're a gamer or something like that, or you just like bought a computer in the last like 3 years, your computer's probably good enough to do what I do. Zoom. I record everything through Zoom. Zoom makes it really, really easy. I did end up getting like actually paying for like a Zoom professional account. And I found that has made things a lot easier. Just with regards to like if I have episodes with multiple guests, if I need to do interviews or have meetings with companies and there's multiple people involved, having the professional account makes that a lot easier because there's no time limit. And it seems like it also fixed a lot of the problems with like calls dropping and things like that. I think that for their professional accounts, they use significantly better servers. So that has made a big difference as well too. So I mean, it sucks. You know, I got to pay whatever it is, the $12 a month or whatever it is to have the professional account. But honestly, for the peace of mind and something that actually works properly and works every single time I want it to work, I'll pay the $12. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. I mean, I really don't use a lot. I guess the headphones these headphones actually came with my first mic.
Oh, nice.
And they're excellent headphones. So I just continued to use them. But I do recommend having a good headphones, a decent mic and a decent webcam. And then the rest is really just like pick a program that's easy to use and intuitive for you and use that for your recording and go from there. So,
well, I appreciate you sharing that with everybody, because I think it's important to know, you know what I mean? There's like some core elements, but you got to fill them out and know what works for you and then keep it moving.
If you exclude the cost of the computer, which was a little bit more because I built a computer for this, I probably have a grand total of like $150 of equipment. Like you don't have to spend a ton of money to get started on this.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. I ended up getting a computer too. Now I got one that was already pre-built, but you know, spec wise, it'll do everything I needed to do for like the next 5 years, you know. But it made like the downloading, the rendering, like all that stuff so much easier, because I think I almost like you said, almost melted my laptop too. Okay, so I want to be able to give my guest an opportunity to have a little bit of fun, maybe in a somewhat serious way.
Sure.
So what's your biggest pet peeve as an interviewer or content creator about that a guest, like a biggest guest pet peeve that they might do? Your time to be honest.
Let me think. For my show, I find I really dislike talking to businessmen. I don't mind people that are in the watch business or come from a business background, but kind of like you alluded to earlier with someone like Mike Pearson, for example. Like Mike cares about watches and he cares about the community and he has an enthusiasm that makes him really fun and easy to talk to. I've talked to some people, some brand representatives, some CEOs and things like that. And it's like, you can tell that they don't really care about watches. They care about the money. They care about the market trends. And I get that they have to care about that stuff because they're a business.
Yeah.
But when you get the vibe that it's like, you own a watch company or you own a well-known watch company and it's pretty clear you don't give a shit about watches, like, I mean, maybe it's maybe for them it's an element of like once you see how the sausage is made, it's not that tasty anymore. Like, I don't know if that's what it is, but I find that it's just like that. I find that very off-putting as a guest, and very quickly when I realize that about a guest, and usually it doesn't happen until you really get a chance to talk to them in the interview. Because a lot of the time it's like, you might exchange DMs with them or talk to them through emails and everything sounds great and professional and whatever. And then you talk to them in person the first time you're recording and it's like, this is not going to be a fun interview, right? Or you'll have people that are very, how do I put it? You'll have people that are just like, they kind of go down like really weird roots on their like in their conversations. And I mean, I generally am someone who likes to let people talk. But it's sometimes it's like I have to really redirect things a lot. And I know it's kind of my job as the host is to redirect things and keep them on a steady train. But someone who is like completely just losing the plot halfway through, and you're like, even sometimes they're like, oh, I kind of forgot what we were talking about. It's like, okay, try and keep up, and then on the flip side, and this is probably one of the worst ones that actually came to mind sort of on the tail end of that. And I think it's a cultural thing. I've noticed it a lot with the Germans is they're so concise to the point that it's like, hey, can you elaborate on this? Or like, hey, can you tell me about this? Or what do you think about this? And they're like, yes. I'm like, do you have anything else you could share about that? No, not really. Like, it's not like they're trying to be facetious or they're trying to be difficult or anything like that. It's just that they're just culturally a very direct group of people. And so I don't like to have to play dentist where I have to try and pull the information out of them. It's like, I like guests that like to, that strike the balance between staying on topic, but also like to share and tell a whole story and really kind of, put themselves out there and really give a whole complete picture of kind of what they're trying to describe. It makes my life way easier as a host when I get to just wind my guest up and let them go. But I ultimately I would much rather have a guest that talks too much than one that talks too little. But a lot of people too, that can just be a comfort level thing, right? Like a lot of people, again, as we talked about earlier, like they're just so like floored that someone wants to hear what they have to say at all. So maybe it's sort of a nerve-wracking thing for a lot of people. And you do get that. It's funny. It's like the people I've found that who like are always like, oh, I've never done a podcast before. I'm so freaking nervous and blah, 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 blah. They're usually the people I find that do the best. Yeah. Because it's like they don't have any bad habits. Right. So like they'll just come on and just knock it out of the park at an interview. Whereas like when you have like the polished businessman who's doing 100 of these, a year, it's like, okay, well, he's just sticking to the script. His brain's just on autopilot because he's telling the same story that he tells 3 times a week, and he's not really interested in being there. And again, I'm not going to like suggest to anyone specific that they're that person that I've had as a guest. I'm very grateful for all my guests that have made time to come on the show. But that's just sort of some of the trends that I've noticed, or some of the people that I find are the least enjoyable to talk to about watches and things like that. So, and again, there's a lot of businessmen that have come on the show that love watches and they're fantastic to talk to, but you can tell pretty quickly when someone's there for the right reason or that they're actually passionate about some of this stuff. And
hosting it, being a guest on interviews has made me realize I can't have my brain go a million different directions. Cause like whenever I talk about something, I can tire things to it. And, sometimes you're so eager to be in a conversation that you cut people off. Number one, like you talked about before. And then number two, I have to redirect myself back to the original point. So whatever analogy I'm making, I have to finish by actually answering the point that addressing the point I was making. But yeah, I think that's part. All right. So one of the final questions is there do you have a specific piece of content, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a book, whether it's a YouTube channel or anything that you ran across when you were doing this content creation thing of yours that kind of either flipped a switch for you or kind of answered some well-rounded, like holistic questions for you that you might have had that you could recommend? If not, it's no big deal.
Like just like in life in general or about podcasting?
Oh yeah, life in general, whatever. Because sometimes they tie together.
Yeah, I mean, like a book that I read last summer, I guess this is more of like a general life one that really, really made a huge difference for me. And it's one of those books that I feel like people should maybe come back and read multiple times through life, like whether it's every 5 years, every 10 years, whatever. I do think it's a book that people should read more than once. Was The Alchemist.
Mhm.
It's a pretty well-known book. I think it came out in like the 90s or something like
Yeah.
that, though. I was translated from Portuguese. I believe it was written by a Brazilian guy. It's not a long book. I read the book all in one day. It was in an afternoon. And it's one of those books that really makes you think about life and kind of helps you focus on the things that matter in life. Um, and it sort of helped reframe the way I thought about a lot of stuff.
Oh wow.
I don't want to I won't get too much into the specifics of it all just because I feel like it's something people should pick up and read. And again, it's not a big book. Again, you can
Yeah.
read it in an afternoon. Um, but it's one that I highly recommend people check out. Um, it was recommended to me by another member of the Watch family, who I respect a lot and who's a really, really cool dude himself. His name's Joe. He's the owner of Diabolic Straps. He's in a couple chats, I think, that maybe
Oh
you're in
nice.
with me as well too. So he's rock solid, and I took his recommendation seriously when I listened to it, or when I read it, and he kind of told me the same thing. He said this book changed my life, and he reads it every few years because, as you know, as you mature, you kind of
Yeah.
enter a different frame of thinking, and it kind of helps you compare some of where you're at in life, and it sort of helps you maybe see the moments where life worked out for you, and show a little bit of gratitude for kind of the good things that you have in your life. So it was one of those things I really, really enjoyed. And I think I highly recommend people check that out as well too. And then one saying that I came across that sort of really just changed a lot for me as well too, in the way I looked at people. Because whether you're in the military or law enforcement, or if you're a more like conservative kind of guy or gal or whatever out there, it's really easy to like get angry and sort of bitter with people. I feel like there's so much stuff out there that sort of is like, this person's such a moron, or something's wrong with them, or why are they doing this kind of stuff, and blah blah. It's like one of the things that sort of helped me just like slough off a lot of things in life was I heard a saying. I don't even know who said the saying. I don't know if it was like one of those Mark Twain quotes or whatever.
Yeah.
A Twain quote. I don't know
Yeah.
whatever they are, but they're pretty. It's pretty good. It was essentially it's like never attribute to malice what you can to incompetence, and it just sort of
Oh
like
yeah.
it's just when it comes to dealing with your fellow man or person out there, you know, it's so easy to get mad or to think, this person cut me off in traffic and they're doing it because they're an asshole, right? Or something like that. And it's like, nah, man, he's in his own
Yeah.
world, right? And when I say incompetence, I don't mean that he's like literally stupid. I just mean like
Yeah.
people are in their own world, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is the main character in their own story,
Yeah.
right?
And we have no idea what's going on in that person's day.
Yeah, you
You
don't.
know what I mean? We have no idea
Yeah,
whatsoever.
exactly. And I think that was something that just really mellowed me out a lot. It was just like, 99.9% of the bad stuff that happens, or the inconveniences, not even bad, because I think the term bad or horrible or terrible gets overused a lot. I think I've
Yeah.
seen people that have having bad days
Yeah.
and getting cut off in traffic, or getting your coffee order wrong or whatever. That's not a bad day. So that's I think that has sort of just helped me reframe a lot of things, and understand things, and not waste my own energy on being angry about something or someone that doesn't even know that they intersected with me that day or caused some sort of, untoward interaction of any kind. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, real quick, Eric, what's your grail piece?
Um, Good question. So I've sort of like, I'm prefacing this with a little bit of a preamble because it comes full circle to some of the conversations I've had previously on the show. Um, I've had the opportunity now, both through the show and just through being a collector of watches for the last, over the last decade, basically. I've really had a chance to check about just about everything out that I want to check out. I
Mhm.
know what I like. I like tool watches. I like watches that are built utilitarian with a purpose. Um, I'm just not that guy that's gonna, even if I could afford one, that ever really wants to have like an AP or a Vacheron. It's not my type of thing, right? And in the past on the show, I've said, I've sort of poo-pooed on Rolex a little bit. And I still think some of what I've said about them still sticks, but when it comes to their older stuff, like their pre-ceramic stuff or like their 5-digit stuff, that were really like the intent behind those designs were meant to be purpose-driven. They were meant to be utilitarian. I still think they made some of the best tool watches ever. So I'm currently working towards getting a Rolex. I'm probably going to pick one up here. I'm hoping at the end of the year.
Oh, nice.
That's kind of my goal. I'm not sure which one I want to get yet. I've always been a really big fan of the Explorer 2. I like the Explorer 1 as well. I like just how like the Explorer 1 sort of just embodies everything about steel sports Rolexes in such as like a boiled down pure little package. But the Explorer 2s have always been something I've really liked. I love Sea Dwellers. I'm just not willing to pay like, 14 grand Canadian for one. I just don't, they're great watches. I just don't think they're quite worth that for like an older one. A 2-line sub maybe as well too. I mean, it's a little cliche, but I think that they're beautiful watches as well. So, I mean, there's a few pieces I'm all looking at when it comes to that, but I do think my grail is going to end up being like a sports Rolex of some kind. And then after that, we'll see. Collection kind of ebbs and flows, right? It goes, sometimes I've had it down to like 4 pieces. Sometimes it's back up to like 15 pieces. Sometimes, so as things come and go, I'll try and hone in more on what I like and kind of slim it down and go from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Explorer 2 is so good, man.
It's a cool piece.
So last thing, let everybody know where they can find you. And if you have anything cool you want to plug or anything that's coming up, feel free. The platform's yours.
No, that is very kind of you. I have a couple things I can kind of go over. So on the upcoming first week of August here, so on Saturday the 5th of August, I'll be in Virginia partaking in an event called Heroes of the Deep, which is a event that I and Brock from Deep Sea EDC planned together. Brock's a Navy diver over in Virginia to benefit Project Recover. Project Recover is an awesome charity that goes all over the world looking for MIA servicemen, finding their remains, bringing them back to the United States for proper burial. I think they do incredibly cool work. I have an upcoming episode actually this week. So I think your episode's going to come out. This will come out on like a Saturday or something like that. And mine comes out on Friday, the day before. We'll be with Derek Abbey, who's the owner and CEO, I guess, of or the CEO and president of Project Recover. So I'll be participating in that event. I'll be at the Lake Phoenix Dive Center there if you want to swing by and give any donations, if you want to come by and say hi, if you want to just come by, take a picture together, whatever you want to do, I'll be there doing that. I have also a collaboration going on right now with Bauzel Watches. They are Australian based. They make Swiss watches though. Very, very cool timepieces. I had a 100 piece collaboration coming out with them. It's available for pre-order currently. I think it's a beautiful watch. It's all blacked out. Looks really cool, really tactical. I'm also working with Luke at Frog Squad Straps on that collaboration as well too. So if anyone wants to check out that timepiece or anything like that, you can find photos of it over on my Instagram, or you can shoot me a DM on Instagram or an email, and I'll get you some information about that as well too. Anything else? Well, obviously, thank you for having me on the show. It's so cool to come on and see your show and the setup and the way that it is now. I know you've been working on it for a while, so it's really an honor to be a part of it and to sort of have my own little installment in it. I love what you're doing. I love the format. I think it's great. It's more structured than mine, which I think is really, really good. It keeps it concise and clean and kind of keeps it going. It's good for the listener as well too. If anyone has any questions, comments, or feedback, you can shoot me an email at ricoswatchespodcast@gmail.com. or you can give me a follow on Instagram over at Rico's Watches Podcast, all one word. Shoot me a DM there anytime. I usually try to be pretty responsive with a first responder schedule. I'm kind of 24/7, so I'm always usually able to get back to people pretty quickly. If you like if you want to listen to my show, it's on every major podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. You just type Rico's Watches Podcast in Google. It's like the first 2 or 3 pages on Google is all my stuff. If you want to watch it on YouTube as well too, you can just go to Rico's Watches Podcast on YouTube. Just like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all that stuff, all the same stuff you should be doing for Jason as well too on his show as well, to show your support too. So thank you so much. Honestly, it was an absolute pleasure, dude.
It's always fun to talk, and I appreciate it. And to the audience, go give Eric if you don't know about him already, you should probably already do, but go give him a follow, check all that stuff out. On my page, you can check out, I just posted an article about how the Omega 75th anniversary Seamaster release is not pulling a Seiko. So go give that a read. It's pretty short and concise. Yeah, cool little graphics. But thanks for coming on board, Eric. I appreciate it. Everyone watching at home, thank you very much. And remember, at watchrolling.com, you make the watch. The watch doesn't make you.